oh, we need to reach millennials. You know, there are millennials right now. They have a $4 million house. There's also a millennial right now that's living in their mom's basement playing video games all day long. Okay, those are both millennials. Which millennial are we talking about?
Okay, so let's talk specifically about branding, okay,
Yes.
and marketing. I'm always fascinated by this. I think, you know, I'm one of those few people that actually likes watching commercials. I like, what are they aiming for here? What are they looking at? I want to give you a few brands that you talk about in your book, Church Marketing 101, which I was surprised to know that you wrote this over a decade ago.
Yeah, 2006.
Okay. That, I mean, we're getting up on almost 20 years because it still is incredibly relevant. It's a great read.
Thank you.
But you talk about some brands in there that just crush it. You talk about the differences between Old Navy, Gap, Banana Republic, and you also talk about Starbucks, and you talk about Nike. I mean, these are some classic brands. What do we learn from them? And then I want you to contrast that with what the church does and how we kind of do it differently.
Yeah. Well, I think a large part of it is they have a tremendous sense of who they are and who they're trying to reach. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference between, you know, Gap Companies owns Gap, Old Navy, and Banana Republic. Banana Republic, probably their price point for a pair of jeans is $150, $200.
Yeah.
Gap's price point for a pair of jeans is probably, I haven't shopped at the Gap in a while, but it's probably in the $100 range. Old Navy, it's probably in the $20 to $30 range.
Right.
So what they do is they just understand we have different clientele. We have different customers that are looking for different things in our store that are different stages in their life. And I think when we, as churches, one of the things I think that we might not do well is we don't understand our audience very well. We don't understand the people that God's called us to reach. And so it actually reminds me of there's a moment in I was about to speak in front of a bunch of pastors in the Congo, and I was about to teach them on church marketing, and some of them have walked 3 weeks to get there. But I was like, God, I need to know how to make this really relevant. And, you know, literally within the hour I'm about to speak, God really clarifies this in my heart. And he sends me to Numbers, the 13th chapter, where Moses sends out the spies. Mm-hmm. And I begin reading how Moses sent out the spies. And just to be brief, he literally just goes, hey, again, God told him to do it, but told him to send out spies. Go look at how they live. Do they live far apart, close together? Are they big stature? There's not a person today. How do they handle commerce? Right? Be of good courage. Bring back a sampling. There's not a person today in modern marketing that wouldn't call that market research.
Right.
So I saw this as like, oh my gosh, this is the first market research project in the history. And man, I was so excited. And I got to tell these Congolese pastors, look, here's the deal. God's called me to be a spy. And my job on behalf of the church is to spy out the land to help them understand who that God's called them to reach. And so and they're, you know, as they do in the Congo, they're jumping up and down, and they really got it, and it helped me to be able to convey my message. But at the end of the day, we'll often have this broad sense of we need to reach younger people. Well, what's younger people?
Right.
Right. That's a pretty broad stroke. Oh, we need to reach millennials. You know, there are millennials right now that a doctor millennial is married to a lawyer millennial, and they have a $4 million house and several $1 million in the bank. And they have 2 kids.
Yeah.
There's also a millennial right now that's living in their mom's basement playing video games all day long. They can't hold down a job.
Right.
Okay, those are both millennials. Which millennial are we talking about? Who are we more likely to reach? And even more so, who are we called to reach? Right? Because that's the brilliance of Paul. I can become all things to all men. But the moment Paul knew who he was called to reach, Paul, an apostle, called him to the Gentiles. It gave him such great clarity. And when you understand the connection between who you are and who God's calling you to reach, the clarity comes. That's what happened. That's what happened for Paul. Now, Paul spoke 5 languages. He grew up in a wealthy suburb known for the arts, right? He was the Jew among Jews. What's the one thing Paul's not? A Gentile. So God sends him to the place that's hardest for him to reach. So he can't rely on his own strength. It's beautiful. Right. So we can't even assume that where God has sent us and who we're supposed to reach there is a byproduct of who we are. It has to be an understanding of who God's calling us to reach. But when you have that clarity of calling, it's kind of like the Matthew 10 experience where Jesus said, go only to the lost sheep of Israel. And here's what I want you to say to them. Those guys, and I love the disciples, but those guys, if Jesus hadn't said that, they would have gone everywhere and said everything.
Which feels a lot like a lot of Sunday mornings I've sat through in places.
Yeah.
That was 10 sermons the guy just gave me.
Yeah. Because we're trying to
aren't here.
Yeah, exactly. Because we got to reach everyone. We got to say everything.
Right.
And the moment the burden is removed off of us and we instead have a clarity of who God's called us to reach. Now, that doesn't mean we are turning our back on anyone. It doesn't mean we're turning our back on the poor. It doesn't mean that it means that we understand with the deliberate intent who God's calling us to reach. And then we can begin praying for them and we begin pursuing them. And we can be able to reach people beyond that circle as God continues to grow it. But being true to a clear sense of what God's called us to do in that community, I think we oftentimes find ourselves in churches almost siloed, thinking we're the church in this town. And it's just not the case. We're just a part of what God's doing in this town.
Right.
And once we take ownership of our part, it gives us great confidence and clarity to be able to pursue wholeheartedly, unabashedly what he's asking us to do. We can set our eyes as flint and pursue it and say no to so many things that we have to say yes to now in the mind of, well, but we got to reach everyone. And you can't boil the ocean.